What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today, March 7th, 2023. I am your host, Sean Murphy, and today we have a lot to discuss in the world of Detroit Pistons. Last night, the Detroit Pistons lost to the Portland Trailblazers, and although, yes, it did put them at their season high 8-game losing streak, it is not the worst basketball that the Detroit Pistons have been playing this season by any means. In fact, there's actually a lot, in my opinion, to be optimistic about. I mean, first of all, the fact that since the All-Star break, essentially, the Pistons have been near top 10 in defensive rating. The fact that this team has been competing over these 8 games and have each loss has been single digits, 6 of the 8 losses. They've been playing really competitive basketball, and it's been off the heels of solid play from Jaden Ivey, a really hungry Marvin Bagley off of his return, where to the exception of last night, he's been playing really good basketball. James Wiseman's been playing with a lot of effort. It's been a lot of up and down as far as the results have gone, but you can definitely tell that at the very least his length and his wingspan gives him some form of impact on the defensive end. And the fact that the Pistons are able to do all of this without pretty much Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren for the entirety of the majority of this run is pretty impressive. And the fact that they're doing so and playing their best basketball as the season goes on, that's what you want to see out of a young team. You want to see them figure it out as the season goes on. You want to see them make those improvements and make those adjustments. And I mean, the guy that, especially I think of when it comes to the player development from the start of the season. I mean, I know we talk about it a lot, but man, Jaden Ivey has just grown so much from his first 2 months in this league. And if you don't want to hear it from me, you can hear it from Sam Vecini over at the Athletic, who did a really good article with James Edwards III talking about where the Pistons are at right now, where he thinks they are comparing to other young teams in the NBA. And he had a lot of really good things to say because the Pistons have a lot of good things going. He talks about the fact that Jaden Ivey is such a better player than he was in his first 2 months. And in particular, where he made those developments was in his passing and his ability to work in the mid-range, which is exactly where I feel like he's been making his developments as well. I mean, you talk about how much Jaden Ivey can do now, just, like with the threat of his athleticism and the fact that he is starting to realize it, and the fact that he's starting to use his eyes, the fact that he's starting to use his body to manipulate defenders a little bit more, is opening up more opportunities for his playmaking as well. And if he can continue to get better with his mid-range jump shot as well, which Vicini pointed out that, to start the season, Ivey was averaging 2 attempts per game in the mid-range, shooting about 27%, but now Ivey's actually been over this stretch averaging about 3 attempts per game, shooting about 57% in the mid-range, which is significantly better. And the fact that, he's finding his groove and he's implementing that as the season goes on, if he can potentially, have a working mid-range game, part of his game by next season, that's something that's going to impact tremendously what the offense can do. And the fact that, he'll be able to be a legitimate threat at 2 of the 3 levels, because he still has to grow as a finisher at the rim. I mean, we see a lot of times where he'll just go in and still just try to yam it or just try to get to the rim and blow past guys. And I think he just still has to learn, he's so fast and so athletic and can get really high and can, really get up to the rim. But it's about that control of what you do when you're up there, and the focus and the determination that it takes to finish at the rim. I think it's just something that takes time to learn, especially in the NBA, how different it is than in college, where Jaden Ivey could go and dunk on just about anybody he wanted to in the Big Ten. But also, the fact that it goes beyond Jaden Ivey, but the fact that you are seeing some promising signs of Marvin Bagley's play and the effort that he's showing as far as what his role is going to be in the long term, what James Wiseman's role is going to be in the long term. We still don't really have a whole lot of information about that. And I know people are talking about what their thoughts are and revisiting the James Wiseman trade. I know we've talked about it quite a bit about how, how much more we see in his upside, especially since he's come to the team. But, at the end of the day, the truth still is it's way too early to tell. And I think especially, just like you've seen over the course of these last few games, I think we've seen the floor with James Wiseman. I think we've seen, hints of the ceiling with James Wiseman. And I think we've seen the fact, the truth still stands that he just hasn't played a lot of basketball. He still has a lot to learn. there's still moments where he looks lost and he's making mistakes. He fouls out very easily. He gets into foul trouble very easily, which you're going to do when you're a 19 or 20-year-old big who's trying to figure everything out on the fly, who missed essentially 2 years of his development between college and his injury in the pros. I mean, can he get that back? I mean, that's some of the aspects of the conversation of him being in Detroit. That's ultimately what time is going to have to tell. But I mean, also playing that game last night against the Portland Trail Blazers, one thing that comes to mind and one thing that's impossible to not think about and consider is when they're going up against a guy like Jeremy Grant, the possibilities of the Pistons maybe signing him again this offseason. It's something that's been reported by our guy, James Edwards III, who is going to be coming on the pod in the next week. So super excited about that. But also something that has been, quite frankly, considered ever since he's left. I mean, just let's be honest. I don't think anyone realized, I think a lot of people didn't give credit the presence that he had on the defensive end and how much of an impact he really had on our wing depth and what our wings were looking like, because he brought such a solid presence there. And yeah, with the trade of Sadiq Bey, that makes that position look even more glaringly of a hole. But I mean, let's be honest, the Pistons are seemingly putting themselves in a position to go and build upon that position this offseason. If Jeremy Grant is someone that's available and is a potential option for the Detroit Pistons to go after, I know Chris Middleton is a potential free agent as well. I mean, there's a lot of options for upgrading for the Pistons at the wing position, and I would love a Jeremy Grant reunion in Detroit for what he brings on the defensive end of the ball. Now, as far as what he would demand as far as on the offensive side, I mean, that would be the interesting part because of the fact that we do have Bojan, we do have Alec Burks, we do have Cade, we do have Ivey. We are going to have whoever we get in the draft this upcoming season. And with that, Jeremy Grant on that team would probably not want to be we would probably not be asking of him to average 20 points a game. But at the same time, knowing what he can bring on the offensive side of the ball, the fact that he is a reliable catch and shoot 3-point shooter, the fact that he can consistently create offense for himself is something that is a lot of value as well. But again, the length and versatility that he brings on the defensive side of the ball is something that I loved since day one that he brought in Detroit. You saw the effect that has for the Portland Trail Blazers. And I think that's just what it's going to come down to, is what Portland decides to do this offseason as well. Because if you look at their situation, they're kind of in the bottom 4, bottom 6 of the Western Conference right now. They're in a 5-way tie with the Clippers, the Jazz, the Lakers, and the Pelicans, in that play-in spot right now. So they're in a really weird place, and they're going to have to figure out what they want to do to ultimately capitalize on having Damian Lillard in his prime. And as good as Jeremy Grant's been, as much as he's made that team better, as much as having a wing like that alongside Damian Lillard is shown to be very valuable, it still isn't putting him in a position where they're necessarily winning games or they're in a position to contend in the Western Conference. And especially with some of the young players that they have with Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, they could certainly piece those guys with some potential draft capital as well to go and improve that roster. And so whether Jeremy Grant will be there next year or not, it's honestly hard to tell, because that comes down to how much shakeup that Portland roster they really think they're going to need. And listen, in my personal opinion, I think there's a lot to like as far as, at the nucleus of this team. I think there's, a lot of the pieces that they've acquired of late. I think they're getting the right idea in the sense that they need to have, solid wing depth and defending around Damian Lillard. You need 3-point shooters who can help space the floor around Damian Lillard. You need a reliable lob threat for Damian Lillard. But at the same time, you need a star around Damian Lillard. You need a guy who can help champion, help bring him to championship level basketball. A guy that can make this team a legitimate contender, because as solid as CJ McCollum was, and as good as guys like Jeremy Grant are, as good as guys like Shaedon Sharpe can be, he needs a guy that he knows that he can count on, a guy that can go and get a bucket on top of what he can do as well. And so back to the Pistons, ultimately what they care about is what's coming down the pipeline, and the fact that, yes, they are losing 8 games in a row. However, that puts them in the position to have number 1 draft lottery odds. And another thing that Vecini said as well, he was asked about what he would do if the Pistons were put in a position to go get a guy, like Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller. If they were to land that 2nd overall pick, what would Sam Vecini do? And he said exactly what Troy said, exactly what I said, exactly, what Jeff said, is you take the talent and you figure it out later. And the Pistons are still not in a position of luxury to say, that we're going to draft for fit. And I agree with that 100%. I know it might be head scratching with the amount of guards we have drafted over the last few years, but with how good a guy like Scoot Henderson can be, I mean, in my opinion, I think you take that swing as well. But that just speaks to all the different storylines that are going to be coming down over the next couple of months, all the different questions and all the different possibilities that are looming over the Detroit Pistons franchise, over the rest of the NBA. There's a lot of puzzle pieces that need to be moved, but first, there's a lot of things that need to be answered first. And down the stretch of this season, we're going to see a lot of these players, still auditioning for their roles, not only on this Pistons team, but on other NBA teams as a whole. I think you're going to see the player development continue to be an emphasis and how much this team can improve and still play really solid basketball on the defensive end. But if they can also get a statement win somewhere in this stretch as well and get some momentum built for themselves going into the offseason as well, that can only be good things. And listen, the fact that Jaden Ivey has been able to handle the ball as much as he's been able to this season, I think could potentially be a blessing in disguise. The fact that Cade Cunningham is going to be fully healthy and ready to go come next season, and the fact that he's going to be able to play basketball this offseason, focus on his craft, actually get better. By the way, did you see the freaking cannons Cade has now compared to what he looked like in his rookie year? This guy's been in the gym, and it's apparent. But with that, there's going to be so much to cover, so much to dive into. This is going to be the place you're going to want to be. And with that, I would love to know what your thoughts are of the team at this point in the comment section down below. What players you want to see here in the long term? What do you think of guys like Hamidou Diallo? Do you see a role for him in Detroit in the long term? I would love to know your thoughts. But that is going to do it for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed